Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a project update video for this 1/6 scale radio-controlled Armortek German King Tiger heavy tank. Since the last video update, the model's tracks have been assembled and mounted, the last of the running gear has been fitted, and the model's running electronics have been temporarily mounted. The tank is currently in running condition and will be test driven in this video. We'll be going over those other updates as well, so stay tuned. Picking up from where we left off with the last video update takes us back to the tank's hubcap stems. In the last video update, I went ahead and described the work that was made to these pieces to improve their overall accuracy in their detailing. Here you can see them now with their coat of primer added, and from here they're going to be getting their base coat of Dunkelgelb just before installation to the tank. Now, the reason why I couldn't finish them in the last video had to do with the detail components that we have here on the end face. If we notice here that there are several fasteners on the flange, and there are several little plates that hold the fasteners in place. In the last video update, I mentioned that I went ahead and developed a set of detail inserts that are 3D printed that are for this application. Well, in the last video, unfortunately, these pieces did not arrive yet, and since now and then, the pieces arrived, and I was able to get them fitted to the hubs. These pieces are posted on the EastCoastArmory.com website and are on the King Tiger catalog. These pieces replace an existing component that I originally had on the catalog for a number of years that did the exact same purpose, only those pieces were comprised of resin castings. The 3D printed versions have officially replaced those ones, and the old resin ones are now OOP. It is at this point now where, like I said before, I could get them into their base coat of Dunkelgelb and get them mounted to the model. But it's nice to see them now all in one base coat, where the detailing now comes alive. With the tank's wheels and running gear basically out of the way, it's now time to focus on the model's track. Now, I did briefly go over the track in the previous video in terms of the assembly of the sprocket, but here I could go over the track in more detail and depth. As for the track itself, this is the standard King Tiger pattern of track. This differs slightly from what is typically more seen on the Porsche vehicles, with the way the track links go together, but that's really a topic for another video. As for these tracks here, the King Tiger does feature a 2-link design. This is different, of course, compared to the Panther and the Tiger 1, which feature a single type link and is just repeated throughout the entire length of track. This is more like something you see like on an Elephant or a Ferdinand. As for the link, like I said again, it's a 2-piece affair. The first link is the master link, and it has here the track guide horns integrally found. The second link is a bridge link and is totally featureless on the back side. The links simply go together, and then after a while comprise that of the length of track. Now, as for the track links themselves, if anyone has ever worked on a 1/16 or a smaller scale vehicle, such as like workable track links in 135 or even Lincoln length links, you'll basically feel exactly at home working with something like this. As for the quality of the Armortek parts, they are very nicely made. They are comprised of all cast aluminum alloy components. They do have some very nice detailing, which is found on the face and even on the inside portions. Now, unlike the Tiger 1 and the Panthers, which have a hollow guide horn with a little mud slit in it, from what I've seen, that is not the case with the King Tiger. King Tiger guide horns were solid and have this type of an appearance to them. Here on the face, you can see the ice cleats present with their distinctive zigzag type pattern, and the block detailing is also very nicely rendered on these links. Same can also be said for the joiner link that we have here. The pieces hinge together absolutely flawlessly. There's no need for any tweaks or sanding or filing. You just simply plug the two links together and they will drop directly into place. A pin is also supplied with the kit. I should say pins, plural, as you are going to need a lot of them. These are comprised of a steel pin, and they are chrome plated, which is good, is that it resists any sort of rust and corrosion, which on something like a tank track is something that can occur, specifically since this will get wet and dirty when the tank is in operation. What is very nice about the Armortek track links is that they are pre-pinned, drilled, so that you can actually put a miniature cotter pin, which is also supplied with the kit, along with these retention discs, which are also pre-drilled. A very nice and realistic type assembly, as this is exactly how these track links are assembled in real life. Now, if anyone is a fan of the channel and can recall one of the earlier Armortek builds I did with that of a Panther, or even the last Tiger 1 that I completed, those two vehicles featured a more primitive setup where you have a crush washer which goes on the end and crimps it in place and holds the pin in place. This pattern was used on some of the first generation of Armortek tanks. However, post 2007, this feature was dropped in favor of the drilled and pin link that we have here. A very nice feature indeed. The cotter pins simply get slid into place, and then to prevent them from falling out, you would bend them around the track link pin, which holds them in place, like the way we have it here on this segment of assembled track. Literally no modifications are needed to be made to the track for its assembly. You can just simply build it out of the box as is. Now, as for the material, like I said before, these are comprised of a cast aluminum alloy, and from what I've seen, these tracks do hold up very well with the operation and performance of the tank. I have several kits in my collection with this pattern track, including a King Tiger, and the tracks were never an issue. Now, it is important to point out that, just like with all RC tank track types, if you run on very hard and abrasive surfaces like asphalt or concrete, this will add more wear and tear to the tracks, as opposed to running them on softer materials such as mud or dirt. And here we have the tracks now fully assembled and mounted to the tank. Now, when it comes time to adjusting the track tension on a King Tiger, this is a little bit more problematic compared to other vehicles of the period, as well as also the other German tanks that were also around at the same time. Of course, I'm talking about the Tiger 1 and the Panther. The reason for that has to do, again, with this dual track link design. On a Tiger or Panther, if you need to adjust the track tension, most of the time you just adjust it from the idler, and if the need arises, remove a link. With the King Tiger's dual track link, you cannot simply remove one link, as the track won't be able to be reassembled. So a minimum of 2 links would need to be removed, which then would require more adjusting done by the idler. Now, as the tank currently sits, the track tension is, in my opinion, where it seems to run the best, from judging from the other RC tanks that I've built. When it comes to these German tanks, you want to have this nice arc to the wheels from the idler, and then it swoops up again to the sprocket. If the tracks tend to touch the top portions of the wheels, this may visually look cooler. However, when it comes time to the tank being in operation, you're going to see that the tracks have a big glop of sag in the front and also in the back. This is not beneficial for RC running and is actually going to cause some problems. Generally, from what I've seen, that's more typically seen on static, smaller scale builds, like in 135. Now, it's also important to point out that at this point in the tank's construction, the vehicle is actually not making contact with the tabletop, and the tank is actually suspended on wooden blocks that are on the middle portion of the hull. Once these blocks are removed and the tank is placed on its own suspension and sitting under its own weight, the tracks are going to dip a little bit more compared to the way you see them here. Also, it's important to point out that right now the tank's weight is not where it's going to be after the tank is going to be completed. Keep in mind, currently the hull is actually empty, and really the heaviest thing on the inside are that of the main motors, which were mounted in the last video update. As the build progresses, you're going to be getting a lot more heavy equipment, such as batteries, RC components, as well as the top deck and even the turret. And you have to keep in mind, on these Armortek Tiger 2s, the turrets are extremely heavy, and this will have an effect on the suspension, which will undoubtedly need to be readjusted as all these equipment gets fitted. But of course, this is all going to be adjusted and discussed in future video updates. It's at this point now where I can start adding some of the basic RC equipment to this tank in order to take it out on its first maiden test run. Once the hubs were painted with their base coat, it's now time to add them to the vehicle. Now, for mounting the pieces on, like I said in the other video, that the hubcaps are threaded and will thread directly into these sections over here. Now, like I frequently mentioned, this is a fantastic design that is found on the Armortek kits. One of the advantages is that it gives you the detail of the component, of course, but it also does it in a very simplistic way, and one that doesn't leave for any obtrusive fasteners that need to be contended with. Another advantage about this is that if this fastener ever gets loose on you, which by the way it shouldn't because it is thread locked in place, but if it ever does get loose on you and falls out, the unit will stay contained in this little cavity over here instead of falling out and hitting the floor, in which case the piece basically is vanished now. As for the installation, I'm going to use some blue Loctite on this. You don't want to necessarily use red Loctite, just in case you ever need to get access to these locations in an emergency. I'm just going to add a little smear on the threads. A little dab will do you on this. And when it comes to the which one goes where, this is, again, where the orientation is going to be important. On the row wheels that are on the outside, we have here the shallow versions, and for the row wheels on the inside, we have the protruded, elongated ones. To install, you simply just thread them directly in place until the threads bottom out. You want to hold on to the wheel to prevent it from spinning on you during the final tightening. Just some hand tightening is all that's required. You don't need a wrench or a strap wrench or anything to get these guys in place. Once mounted, they're not going to be getting loose or falling off on you during operation, specifically with the Loctite, and in this case with the layers of paint that are on the component. And there we have it. I'm going to finish off this side of the tank, to which then the hubcaps are done, and I can progress further with the build. And here are the hubcaps, now mounted to the hull. Now, one thing to keep in mind of when you mount the hubcaps in place, they should all line up absolutely perfect with each other if you look at them from the side. If you do that and you see that there's an offset between one or two of the wheels, you might want to check to see if the pieces are fully bolted on or screwed in all the way to the extent of their threads. If done properly, you should have all of the pieces indexed like the way you see here. Once the track and the hubcaps are done, the next area of focus that I pay attention to was actually getting the tank operational and in a running format. Here we have the necessary equipment that has been fitted, albeit very, very temporarily, to the tank in order to get the tank running. Now, because this version of the King Tiger kit was the one that was released back in 2013, the electronics package that this model was supplied with is the older pattern, which you can see some of it over here. Now, since these kits have came out, Armortek have redesigned their electronics package, and these units here are no longer offered. These units here were found on Armortek tanks from the 2010 to approximately 2014 time frame. After that point, the systems were redesigned, and that's the current systems that we have now. I have built a few of the Armortek kits that utilize these electronics here, and they do build up and work very well. The difference with these electronics are that on the older sets, we have the power supply, the speed controller, and the auxiliary speed controller, which would be for the turret functions. All of those units are comprised of 3 small boxes that need to get wired together. When Armortek redesigned the unit, they facilitated all of this equipment into one large box, and this, of course, cuts down on the amount of electronical plugs that are needed to get the system up and running. But again, having said that, these older units work perfectly fine, and if anyone has one of these older units on hand and are thinking about upgrading to the newer system, it's really not necessary, as again, these systems here work perfectly fine. Now, with the motors are the exact same units and have not been changed at all from the older and current generation of Armortek tanks. Where this is really comes into effect is with these units that we have here. Starting with the most important unit is the power supply. The power supply box is the component which the current from the battery enters, and then from here, this is what allocates the current to the different voltages that are needed for the tank. Either 24 volt for the main motors, or 12 volt for the other accessories that are needed to be powered on the model. This is also your power switch. If I hold the unit here, you'll see this red button. This red button is your main power on and off switch, and when you click it, this light here turns on, either green when you're ready to go, or if there's a problem, it will turn amber or red. Here we have several connections. One of these is for that of the main power, i.e. the battery, comes into here. The next one is the 24 volt current, which goes out to the speed control module. The speed control module then, of course, funnels to the two tracks, left and right. The third plug that we have here goes to the auxiliary power box, which is not going to be discussed in this video, as that is something of topic in a future video update. Then we have two smaller connectors that we have here. These are for lower voltage, I believe 12 to be specific, and these power the accessories like the smoke system. Moving from the power supply now takes us to the speed controller. Like I said before, speed controller is what's used to control the motors via the radio. Now, the system is very simplistic in that you just need one of these boxes to control both of the motors. And the way it's laid out is pretty straightforward. The wires that are yellow and blue on either side go to one of the motors. One motor for each side. These two black wires in the center connect to your receiver. And these two wires here are the power supply, which gets emitted from, of course, the power supply module. Now, as for power, this is facilitated by two 12-volt batteries that are hooked up in series to bump the voltage up from 12 to 24 volts. All Armortek systems run on 24 volts. This is specifically being pointed out for their tanks. Can't really speak for their armor cars or half-tracks, but for their actual tanks, they're always 24 volt. 24 volt is really what you need for propelling one of these large 1/6 scale tanks. 12 volt powered units tend to be severely underpowered, specifically when it comes to lugging something with this type of mass on an off-road condition. Now, as for the batteries, I'll be utilizing two lithium-ion batteries. These two batteries we see here are just for mock-up. These are actually the batteries from the other Tiger 1, which were temporarily borrowed for this video over here. I do have a set of batteries on order, and once they come in, of course, I'll be able to start the floorboard and battery harness mounting system. But again, that's for another video. As for these type of batteries, like I said before in a few of these videos, I used to use lead acid for this purpose, but lead acid batteries are severely lacking. They're just, I moved away from them. It's a dead-end technology, and these lithium ions are better in just about every single way. They do cost a lot more than the lead acids. However, you do get longer runtime, longer battery life, and just less maintenance required for something like this compared to the legacy lead acids. And of course, one huge asset is that these are a fraction of the weight of the lead acids, which is beneficial for the tank's performance, as now it's less weight that needs to be lugged around by an already extremely heavy model tank. The units are wired together and would be connected to this plug. Now, the setup that you see here is again from the current generation of Armortek electronics, in that they don't use these plugs anymore. It's a different system, but I jury-rigged it in order to just get the tank operational. Of course, all this is going to change as the interior starts fleshing out. With the basic electronics now hooked up, the tank is now operational. Now, to take it on its first test drive, I need to first lower the lift table that we have here. Now, if anyone recalls from the lift table tutorial video, this table is designed so that it shouldn't topple when the tank gets driven on or off of it. And we're going to see that in operation for the first time in this video. Of course, first thing I'm going to do is bottom the table out. And I'm going to now get the scissor ramps so I could start the running. And here you can see the scissor ramp now hooked up to the lift table, and the tank is ready to be driven off. Now, as a side note, these ramps that you see here are another bit of equipment which are basically mandatory for not only these Armortek tanks, but RC large-scale tanks in general. As again, you're not going to be able to just pick these things up and put them off the table. And these aluminum ramps are very easily come by and work very well. The tank is currently on, and I'm going to start driving it off of the lift. Here you get to see the anti-tilt table in operation. Well, that was very fun. I mean, informative. The tank performed absolutely perfectly, and the track tension is basically where it needs to be. Now, again, with the addition of more equipment and the turret, this is going to change the weight, which is probably going to need to have the track to be adjusted slightly from this point here. But this is a great point to start with for that of reference. The tank handled both on and off-road conditions without a hitch, and I was able to go up and down inclines. That's what was seen before, and the suspension was able to flow with the terrain in a very fluid manner. All in all, everything looks to be green lighted, and I can progress further from this point here. Now, unfortunately, as much as I would love to test drive the model any further, unfortunately it looks like a storm is about to roll on in, so I might as well pack up my stuff and get the tank back onto the lift and back into the shop. And with that, that wraps up this project update video for this radio-controlled Armortek 1/6 scale German King Tiger heavy tank. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook, where there are more photographs of this particular build that have been posted since project start, as well as the other smaller and larger scale builds that are found on the ECA channel. In addition to that, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks for watching.